Welcome to another edition of Life, Love, and Philosophy. My special guest today is educator and author Anna Tomasino. Anna is currently teaching at the College of Staten Island. She's taught for the City University for almost a decade, and she has 3 published books to her credit, and indeed has just finished her first novel. Today I'd like to focus on one of her books, a book entitled Discovering Popular Culture. And one of the reasons I want to focus on this book is that so many of the themes I've talked about in past programs, this book addresses itself to. Anna, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a great honor. As you know, I have your show on my DVR. I tape it so that even if I'm teaching, I can watch it the next day, and it's just a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now, you've put together, as I mentioned, several interesting I'm more familiar with this one than the other ones. This book, again, Discovering Popular Culture, devotes itself to many dimensions of popular culture in America. What was your aim in putting this book together?
Well, what I wanted to do is when I did my second book for Longman, which was Music and Culture, I enjoyed the process, but I wanted to cast a wider net. So I decided to do a book on popular culture because it covers not only music, but film, advertising, television, the internet, books, everything. So I wanted to cast a wider net because a lot of the issues, and you bring this up in your show, about wisdom, a lot of our values are all reflected in popular culture. And I wanted to find a way to have my students really talk about the world that we live in, the culture we're immersed in. And I find that with students, and you know this because you've taught and you teach, they need to feel empowered. If you give them a topic and they feel like, I know this subject, you have their attention, and then that's when all the magic happens.
Yeah.
And you could really start talking about these very important issues about, you know, what is my life about? How do you live the good life? How do I acquire knowledge? What is wisdom? What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom?
I can understand that students can really be turned on by a book like this because it deals with so many different dimensions of our culture, and it's very relevant to their life experiences. I must also add that I was impressed by the amount of research you must have done in putting this book together, because I would estimate there are about 30 essays and or articles by academics, journalists, etc. Could you just tell us a little bit about the process involved in putting the book together?
Well, first of all, it was a challenge because I had to keep the book within 250 pages. And also I wanted to cover the diverse mediums that I just mentioned. So I did a lot of research, and I tried my best also to introduce students to different types of material. That's why I have journalists, scholars, academics, mainstream press, even, you know, a Senate report, you know, from the government.
I recall.
And so I really took a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what essays best express the issues that I believe students really need to think about right now. And some of the topics I made sure to cover was, in this book here, was gender, masculinity, and femininity, images of this, because I see in our culture, and you brought this up in one of your shows on masculinity, that a lot of people think that, you know, to be a man you have to be, you know, macho, into sports, as you mentioned in your last show. And that's not true, because what counts is that you're a good human being, that you have integrity. With women, there's so much energy, and you know this because you see this caught up in, you know, working out and how you look and physical appearance, that I think if my students could disengage that energy from focusing on appearance and focus on the important things in life. Are you a good person? Are you contributing to society? Because there's a study in Discovering Pop Culture by Dove, Real Campaign for Beauty, and what they talk about in that study is that truly 77% of women believe that beauty does not have to be defined by physical characteristics. And yet, you know, a large percentage of women, they don't find themselves beautiful. So if we could spend time telling our young adults, listen, if you want to be beautiful, you need to feel confident. You want to feel assertive. You should be, you know, doing something that you love and be happy. Because whenever you see someone in a room and they're confident and they're happy, they exude.
What you're really talking about, I think, is critical thinking. that we are exposed to television, advertising, music. Some of it can have a very positive influence on us. Some of it, unwittingly, can have a very negative influence on us. And my guess is that one of your objectives in teaching and in writing a book like this is that you want to stimulate people's thinking so that perhaps they will not suffer any harm from the media, that they'll be able to look at it with a critical eye.
Absolutely, and that's why I really love your show.
Thank you.
I absolutely think that what you do is you encourage people to think, and you even say that, well, what do you think? You know, when you bring up, you know, quotations and your own wisdom and you share it with people. I think that, okay, we know that we get a lot of values from our family and from church and from school, but the mass media is another form that not only gives us values but reinforces certain values. And I think we need to step back and question, you know, okay, does having a BMW and a big house, that material wealth, is that really going to make me happy? If I pursue those, what kind of person am I going to be? You know, you can look at the shadow self. Will I, you know, step to the other side and become greedy? Will I hurt people to get that promotion?
Sure.
So I want students to really look at everything around them and to sort of reflect and say, okay, I'm watching this TV show. Everybody here is, you know, this thin on television. Is that the ideal beauty? Is that what beauty is? Or is beauty, you know, flipping the channel and looking at someone who's doing some humanitarian work, who's affecting, like you say, the quality of life for people on a daily basis?
Sure.
You know?
I think one of the dangers of the media is that often people don't reflect on what's happening to them when they watch television
Yes.
or look at an advertisement. And what you're trying to do in your book, in your teaching, is to make people more introspective.
What's like, okay, here's a perfect example, and I think your viewers know this, and I know this. You're watching television, you may have eaten already lunch, and you see these food commercials, and then you might end up like getting up and then you're hungry, but you're not really hungry. What's motivating you to go up and eat? It's because you just saw this commercial, and the saliva, you know, your saliva you start salivating and you want to go and eat something. And then on another thing, you could see, go to the mall and buy something. Like, why am I buying this? And in fact, there's a study in Discovering Pop Culture on happiness. John Gertner did an interview for the New York Times Magazine, and he interviewed, I just wanted to read part of this for your audience.
It was the title of the article is The Futile Pursuit of Happiness.
Exactly.
I found that title to be exciting. And one of the people he interviewed for the article was Daniel Gilbert, a professor of psychology at Harvard, who has done a lot of research on happiness. And
Exactly.
could you tell us, let's go to the article right now. I was going to wait until late in the program, but since you brought it up, and it is so germane to what we're talking about, let's talk about some of the findings that Professor Gilbert and some of his colleagues. Professor Gilbert, again, teaches psychology at Harvard, but he has worked with 3 other academics from different institutions, one of whom is a Nobel laureate economist. And they have researched this subject of happiness, maybe the most relevant of subjects, to find out what makes people happy and what doesn't make people happy. Could you just tell us about some of Professor Gilbert's findings, some of the things that, again, are reported in this article, in your book, entitled The Futile Pursuit of Happiness?
And to put it just in common language, like that, you know, without using academic terminology, that we don't always really know what we want, that we are guilty of miswanting.
Yeah.
And his point is that, as you know, because you read the article, that we are not very good at forecasting how happy we're going to be with our decisions. So, for example, somebody could say, and he mentions this in the article, they want a BMW or something like a house, and you might think it's going to make you happy, but once you actually acquire it, it doesn't make you, one, as happy as you think it will make you, and the second, that happiness is not going to endure for as long a period as you think.
I like the word you used, and he used, miswanting. He uses that word. And let me just pick up on what you said, because in reading the article, I took some copious notes.
Oh, great.
And let me give you his own words. Gertner says they claim, these professors claim, these professors who have researched the subject of happiness, that, quote, we falter when it comes to imagining how we will feel about something in the future. We might believe that a new BMW will make life perfect, but it will almost certainly be less exciting than we anticipated, nor will it excite us for as long as predicted. And a new plasma TV. You may have high hopes, but the impact bias suggests that it will almost certainly be less cool and in a shorter time than anticipated. Could we say that one of the findings of this Harvard professor of psychology and his colleagues is that so often, maybe usually, we have unrealistic expectations? Is that what it really comes down to, unrealistic expectations?
I absolutely agree with you. And not only unrealistic expectations, and this goes back to, you know, Socrates, who you've talked about a lot on your show, know thyself. So that's why we have to know ourselves, because you might want something, but if you step back and just think about it and say, okay, this is what I expect. Is it realistic? Is it unrealistic? And really this notion of happiness as a byproduct of activity, that is so true, because sometimes you think this acquisition that's so easy to gain, I could just, you know, take out my credit card and buy it, is going to make me happy.
Sure.
When in reality, sitting down and, like you said, preparing for your show, or my students doing their homework, or for me going, you know, to the library to do research, those 5-6 hours will bring me greater happiness than going to the mall and purchasing a bag or something that I think is going to be instantaneous.
Again, the ancient Greeks used the expression, know thyself. And the idea is that if we don't have a good handle on what we really believe, on what we value, and if we don't critique our own value system to make sure that our values are in harmony with our pursuit of happiness, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
This article, to me, and it's really a superb article, I think, it stimulated my thinking about what so many of the great thinkers have said they believed were the main causes of happiness in life. And I know I'm accurate in saying the great thinkers, for the most part, cool it on material things. Sure, we need an adequate income. We need so many possessions, so many necessary possessions. But the idea is that so much of happiness is not dependent on things so much as on how we think, on how we feel.
Exactly.
And that if we don't monitor our thinking and think more clearly about ourselves and about life, then all of these things aren't going to make us very much happier.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And they also show, I've read about studies that show that after making a certain amount of money financially, that the difference in living doesn't dramatically change in lifestyle.
Yes, in fact, in this article that we're talking about, the author of the article says this, and I'm quoting him: a large body of research on well-being seems to suggest that wealth above middle-class comfort makes little difference to our happiness. And I should mention the author of this article, this gentleman who interviewed these academics, he himself is a senior editor at Money Magazine.
Money Magazine.
Senior editor. So again, remember, the senior editor, or a senior editor, at Money Magazine is saying a large body of research on well-being seems to suggest that wealth above middle-class comfort makes little difference to our happiness.
And I think what you said before, this ties in perfectly about like people needing to think about what they're ingesting from media, because if you think about it, people will spend a lot of time talking about what I'm eating and the fat content, but what am I listening to? What am I reading? What am I taking intellectually into my mind? They don't spend that time to think about it.
Sure.
And I think, from talking to my students, a lot of them, they decide to go into certain careers because of the financial.
Yeah.
But then if they think about what their passion is, that's where you really have success in life. Because if you just go for the material, then you might get the material, but you're going to lose something we can never get back, which is all that time that you lost. And then all of a sudden you're older, you're unhappy, and everything. So
I like the word you used. I think to get some enjoyment out of life, and we know life is difficult, but I do believe we can get significant enjoyment and tranquility from it. It means having a passion about something. Joseph Campbell, the famous professor of mythology at Sarah Lawrence College, he talked about following your bliss.
Yes.
And he said that one of the things he suggested to his students over the years, and he taught at Sarah Lawrence for more than 30 years, is that they think deeply about what really makes them happy. Not what they think at a superficial level might make them happy, but rather what at a deep level really makes them happy. And he said, when you do that, you're following your bliss.
That's a beautiful quote, and it's so true. And I also, in fact, last week I was talking to my students about this. How do you know if you're following your bliss? If you know what makes you happy, look at what you're doing. Like I told them, just do a little pie chart and kind of look at your life and say, how much of my time is devoted to things that have to do with my bliss and how much of it is not?
Yeah.
And there's a little visual thing. You just do a little circle, do a pie chart, and you could see, wow, I want to be a writer more than anything. How much time do you spend writing? No, I don't have time. Do you really want to be a writer? You know, I want to learn all of the works of Thoreau. I want to master them. How much time do you spend reading them? You know, and that's how you kind of see, am I following my bliss?
And in following your bliss, one of the things we have to think about, and this is what you're talking about, among other things, how we spend our time.
Yes.
You know, are we involved in a job where we really like doing what we're doing? Most people, I assume, don't like everything about their jobs, but if one can find a job where you like a lot of things about the job, then you're probably on the right track. Because again, I think it's idealistic and unrealistic to have a job where you're going to like every single thing about it. But so many people, I think, as you suggested, will go and do a job that maybe might involve a very good income and maybe social status, but yet they don't find the work interesting. And I think, therefore, the money and the social status will not be enough compensation for a job they don't enjoy doing.
And then they walk around and they're miserable and they're unhappy. And then they do what, I love this in one of your shows, you said this, happiness stealing.
Yes, happiness stealing.
And that's what they do because they're so miserable and they go around and...
Well said, yeah. I think every happiness stealer is himself or herself a very unhappy person.
That's exactly it.
In fact, I remember telling my students one day that if you're trying to determine how happy a person is, that this can be quite difficult because appearances can be deceiving. That some people who smile a lot, psychiatrists will tell you, can be desperately unhappy. Unhappy, especially men. I think psychiatrists will tell you especially that men tend to be greater mask wearers than women, that men don't want other people to know they're hurting. So in talking to my students about how you might determine who the happier people are, I said this. I said, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some famous thinkers, the way to determine how happy a person is by their behavior. Do they promote happiness in the world? Or do they tend to steal people's happiness? Because if they are people who tend to promote happiness in the world, if they're warm-hearted people, for example, pretty easy to talk to, lacking in mean-spiritedness, for example, you can be pretty sure they're getting some real satisfaction out of life, some real joy out of life. It doesn't mean their lives are problem-free.
Exactly.
But definitely they're getting some enjoyment. Whereas if somebody is a happiness stealer, no matter how happy they appear to be, no matter how much they're smiling, don't believe it. It's probably a mask. There's a quote I like from Marlon Brando, the famous actor. When he died, the International Herald Tribune ran a big obituary. I was in Europe, by the way, when he died. And I was reading the International Herald Tribune, and they quoted Brando. They had several quotes from him. And one of them was this. Brando talked about the art of acting, and he said that acting is the least mysterious of crafts. He said most people do it all day long. I was thinking about many people I know, and of course we all do it to varying degrees. Hate to admit this, but I probably act at times too. I try to be authentic.
Of course, we always, right, exactly.
But again, one of the differences, I think also, one of the differences between people who promote happiness in life and one of the and those who steal other people's happiness is, I think, those who promote happiness are working at trying to be authentic. They're working at trying to remove the mask.
Exactly,
and be real,
they're trying
real people.
to. They know themselves, so they try to catch themselves.
Yeah.
They look at their patterns of behavior and like, oh, okay, I'm doing this now. Let me try to be.
I like what you said, catch yourself. You know, I want to go to another key statement on this article. Again, we're talking about an article entitled The Futile Pursuit of Happiness. It's an article, by the way, which appeared in the New York Times Magazine in 2003, written by, is it John Gertner? John Gertner. And the main academic, again, he interviewed, as I mentioned before, is Daniel Gilbert of Harvard. And Professor Gilbert said this, in summarizing his research, he said this, and again, I'm quoting him. Our research on happiness simply says that whether it's the thing that matters or the thing that doesn't, both of them matter less than you think they will. things that happen to you or that you buy or own, as much as you think they make a difference to your happiness, you're wrong by a certain amount. And here's the key sentence, You're overestimating how much of a difference they make. None of them make the difference you think. And that's true of positive and negative events.
And
you want to comment on that latter part?
You absolutely, I love the way you went through the article, because that is the kernel. That is unbelievable. So this is, I think, comforting for us, because if we overestimate with the negative events how catastrophic it's going to be, then we can sit back and have a little faith that things are going to work out, that we will rise to the occasion and handle that. And then for positive things, then maybe if we don't get the job that we really want, or I'm looking for an agent for my book. If I don't get the agent immediately for my novel, that it's okay.
Sure.
That it's not as big a deal as I think it is.
So we have unrealistic expectations about good things that happen to us and how happy they're going to make us. And we have unrealistic expectations about the bad things that happen, thinking that they'll make us more unhappy than they actually will.
And you're right, though, because if you go back and you really need to think about life, because in the moment of pain and in the moment of not getting a job that somebody really wants, in that moment, no one can tell you it's okay. Things will be all right, don't worry. Because in that moment, what you really want is somebody to listen to your anguish of not achieving your goal.
Yeah.
But if you think and know yourself, you say, okay, in this moment, I'm going to feel upset. But tomorrow, next week, the week after, I'm going to make it. I will overcome this. It won't matter 5 years from now. Some, people, self-help books, and they say if you really want to cope with an event, sit back and look at it and say, will this bother me 5 years from now?
Yeah.
Will this matter 5 years from now?
Excellent way to look at things. Another aspect of this, his comments about the idea we exaggerate how unhappy bad things will make us. I was thinking of something Thoreau said. Thoreau said that there is a compensation, he thought, in every disappointment. And in conjunction with that thought, so many of the great thinkers say that one of the aspects of living that helps us to achieve wisdom, is, believe it or not, suffering.
Yes.
That suffering can be a catalyst to help us to think at higher levels, that so often our pain, whether it be mental, whether it be emotional, focuses our attention in ways that other things don't focus our attention, and gets us to think more deeply about what's really important in life.
Exactly.
So that you go to the hospital, you have an operation, and yes, it's a bad thing, it's going to make you unhappy for a time, but the idea is something positive may come out of that illness. It may help you to try to put aside the trivial things in life and attach less importance to the trivial things in life, and remind you about what's really important in life.
And this is why I love your show, because you really encourage self-reflection. And sometimes to reflect upon the self, you're not in a vacuum. This is why there's so many great books. You don't have to sit back and just try to cope with something on your own, with your own mind. You can take a great book, open up the book, and the book can actually help you find a way and a method through that pain and through that moment, through that suffering.
In my own life, suffering in my own life has been a catalyst for me, not only to engage in more introspection about life, to try to get more perspective, and as I like to say, to see the trees, to see the forest and not just the trees. But my suffering also has been a catalyst to read. I recall when I was an adolescent, like other teenagers, I had my problems, some serious, and I found that books provided solace. Books provided a guide to how to deal with those problems. I'm not suggesting everybody has to read. I have a passion for reading. It's my main interest in life, besides trying to love other people. But it has been a guide. Other people might look to music, for example. They might look to art. And music and art also can be great guides to helping us to live more fulfilling lives, and can be a source of solace. And you have that book entitled, again, Music and Culture. Anna has written another book, and again, put together another book of articles and essays entitled Music and Culture.
And this is why I picked the topic, to get back to your first question, discovering pop culture. I wanted to cast a wider net, because my goal is, if I go into class and I tell my students, okay, we're going to look at Socrates, and I taught Antigone last semester.
Yeah.
They are taken aback, and they feel intimidated. But if I go in there with Gertner's article about happiness, and we talk about the acquisition of goods and will they really make us happy, everybody has something to say about it.
Yeah.
And then that gets into this discussion of happiness. And then we could talk into the beautiful quote that you pointed out about the negative events. Will they be as catastrophic, as we think they will be? And then students can start thinking about their life and about, what's important.
This is what, in my opinion, what education is really all about. I can remember some very frustrating experiences as a student. I can remember taking philosophy courses, and philosophy is my main passion, and the professor or teacher didn't make it relevant to people's lives. And I'm sitting there week after week saying, please make this relevant to our lives. But
It's true.
You're turning people off to philosophy because they think it's not relevant to their lives.
Exactly.
And
then
if you can make literature, this is what you're trying to do,
Right.
because you're teaching English literature,
And
to make
writing.
it relevant to their lives and writing.
You're absolutely right. And you see it, their eyes light up, and they're like, oh, okay, so I should really think about what it means to be an individual. And also, I know we had talked about maybe talking about with advertising, they know all the advertisements. And in my book, there's an article about the Marlboro Man, about how successful, the campaign was for Marlboro cigarettes, using the cowboy, this macho man, the image of America, the westerns and everything.
A lot of manipulation in that
Lot of
Marlboro
manipulation.
advertisement, but it's very successful.
Very, very successful.
We are running short on time.
Okay.
This has gone very fast for me, by the way.
Me too.
And we're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to get
Oh,
together
that
again
would be
for
great.
another
We
show.
still have so many
A
things
whole
to
lot of
talk
things.
about.
And again, I
Thank you
appreciate
so
very
much.
much you being on my program.
I appreciate it.
As usual, I would like to end with a quote from Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau, in his masterpiece, Walden, wrote the following. He said this: to affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts.